let's dive straight in. Carrie, you're first up. Who is the most underrated player in the Premier League?
Ladies and gentlemen, I give to you Aston Villa's Conor Horahan, who is the most underrated player in the Premier League. Now, okay, Villa are pretty terrible, and no one ever talks about anybody there apart from Jack Grealish. But Horahan is overlooked, ignored, even by his own manager. Dean Smith talked about him in February, saying he's been starved of minutes. Yeah, because you're not picking him, and you should be, because he can contribute vital goals. He brings a vital element of aggression to the midfield, and his sheer hard work and industry makes him invaluable, particularly for a side in Villa's position. So yes, Horahan.
Absolutely beautiful start. Marcus Foley, who are you going for?
I'm going for Emi Buendia of Norwich. Basically, they're bottom of the table, yet he's contributed 7 assists thus far this season towards their 25 goals, which is roughly 30%. That's 4th in the league, only behind Kevin De Bruyne, Trent Alexander-Arnold and Riyad Mahrez. And he's also produced, I think it's 73 chances, which is 4th in the league, behind De Bruyne, Trent Alexander-Arnold and James Maddison. Basically, he's producing championship challenging stats in the worst team in the league. So he's class.
Pete Sharland.
Look, it's very simple. Goalkeepers are the most underrated position in football. No one gives them any credit apart from when they make a mistake. As far as goalkeepers this season are concerned, the best of the bunch is arguably Vincent Guaita of Crystal Palace. He's the most underrated player in the Premier League this season.
Okay, and completing the lineup is my pick. Now, this is probably a good chance to dive deep into the unsung teams of the Premier League, your Watfords, your Bournemouths, even your Arsenals. But I panicked, and I've picked Tottenham's Lucas Moura. Now, seems ridiculous, putting Lucas Moura up against the three you've discussed. I just presumed you'd all go for big players who have been just kept on under wraps. But that hasn't happened. So anyway, I'll still make my case, but I'm sure I'm going to be absolutely savaged here. Basically, Lucas Moura has done more for Tottenham than Harry Kane and Son Heung-min in terms of trying to deliver a trophy. It was him who nearly carried Spurs to the Champions League title. His hat-trick against Ajax was more important than anything individual that Kane or Son have done. And he's criminally misused. He's shunted from substitute to lone striker to winger, depending on who's available, depending on which injuries. How is anyone meant to cope with that? I admit he's not had the best season. But for a player who was once turning on for PSG and only shafted out for Neymar, I think he's really actually neglected in the conversation. He never crops up in transfer stories. And for me, Lucas Moura, for that reason, is, I'm somewhat reluctant to say it now, but the most underrated player in the Premier League.
I can start with this. The inherent issue you have here, Snowball, is that underrated means that they're good and no one's talking about it. Lucas Moura is not that good a player. It's really as simple as that.
I say I'm gonna. My argument's gonna drift apart as soon as I heard all you three speak and players, and I was like, "Oh, that's a great shout." Carrie, "Oh, that's a great shout." Pete, "That's a great shout." Me, not so. I do think he's a great player. I just think he's a bit burnt out this season. He's played so many minutes because he's had to kind of carry this Tottenham's team on his back. There's no Kane, there's no Son, and he's just running himself into the ground. But there's one constant with Tottenham as they're falling apart, and that is Lucas and admittedly Giovanni Lo Celso chasing round. Trying to win the ball back.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Pete. He's pretty one-dimensional to be underrated. And to be fair, he's had good moments, but they're just moments. They're fleeting moments. And I think he's more been unlucky than underrated. Yeah, he probably should have started the Champions League final, but that doesn't mean he's underrated.
Okay, and I should probably introduce a new element. Loads of you have actually been getting in touch with your underrated players too. We'll come to them in a moment. But we are going to have a stick or twist at the end of this. So I'll go through Marcus, Carrie, Pete and myself. We'll have an opportunity to either stay with our picks or swap to someone else's or someone that the fans suggested. And I'm saying now that I'm 100% twisting. So I don't think we need to pick apart Lucas Moura anymore. That's already been done for us, I think. I might turn to Pete Sharland and Guaita. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. All we know him for is dropping the ball in the net against Sheffield United.
Yeah, and admittedly, he'd be the first to admit that that was a terrible, terrible mistake. The caveat to that is that it was a terrible day at Selhurst Park for keepers. It was so windy then. And also, that is pretty much the only mistake he has made so far this season. Like, case in point, you listen to Roy Hodgson speaking after the game. He came out immediately and said that after the game, Guaita came into the dressing room. He said, "Look, lads, I've cost us 3 points there. I'm so sorry." And the universal reaction from Hodgson, from the coaching staff, from the players was that, "Look, mate, if it wasn't for you, we would be considerably further down the table with considerably fewer points. The fact that we are where we are is largely down to you." Palace know that they've got an absolute steal of a goalkeeper who they picked up for free from Getafe in 2018. He's kicked out Wayne Hennessy, who was one of the most inconsistent keepers going in the Premier League as far as I'm concerned. He's now established himself as first choice. There was even talk before the coronavirus hit that he might have been called up to Spain. You look at the way David De Gea and Kepa Arrizabalaga have been playing this year. There is no doubt that the best Spanish keeper in the Premier League has been Guaita, and he's probably been up there with Alisson this season.
I think Alisson's a stretch, to be fair. I also think he probably benefits from the fact that Hennessy was pretty poor for a number of seasons. So you've sort of got that comparison between the two, which probably gives him a little bit more credit in the bank than he deserves. He's good. He's a great shot stopper, but as you say, he's dropped one in the net. How good is he? Is he, in your opinion, how good is he as an all-round keeper? Like, I've heard things about him being a great shot stopper, but in terms of generally, like, you look at Alisson is absolutely class at everything. Yeah.
So the big question mark for goalkeepers is when you move from a club like, if you were to leave a club like Palace and go to a club like Liverpool, you're playing a very different game all of a sudden. It's very difficult to judge. It was one of the big critiques of Joe Hart's game when he was at City. For me, Guaita could step up if he needed to. He could fulfill the Adrian role, which is come in as a great lower level keeper and be the backup for someone like an Alisson and step in and not look too out of place. Obviously, Adrian's game against Atletico aside, he's good with his feet. On his Premier League debut against Leicester, he had a very hairy moment with Jamie Vardy. He was lucky to get away with a foul being given there. But apart from that, he's good at the ball at his feet. He's surprisingly comfortable coming to the ball in the air as well. There's obviously this big stereotype about keepers that come from Spain. The way De Gea was treated when he first came in, they can't take the ball in the air. Guaita's got no issues with that. He's very happy coming through. He doesn't always catch it, sometimes punches, but he does come through. He does make himself known. He's throwing himself in front of everything. He's got no bravery concerns whatsoever. And
that's a pretty passionate monologue there for Guaita. Carrie, don't think you can get away with just sipping your Arsenal mug of tea. Loads of players in this division have 2 goals and 3 assists. What is it that makes Horahan so special and underappreciated?
I think the thing about Horahan is that he's come through from lower division football. He's done that journey from bottom tier up to the Premier League. And that doesn't happen so much anymore, although it did kind of 10, 15 years ago. And I think that's partly what's contributed to him being underrated by even his own manager. I think a lot of people are kind of looking at, Danny Drinkwater, John McGinn, Jack Grealish as the first choice midfielder at Villa because they've got names, they've got this kind of top tier reputation, whereas Horahan hasn't. He says that he's relied on his hard work all of the time, and I think in terms of just looking at the sheer stats, particularly this season, they haven't been great. He hasn't had as many minutes, but he was the one who marshalled that midfield to Villa's promotion last year. He's been absolutely crucial in a lot of the Ireland matches in recent months as well. And so I think that is why, this is what I'm picking Horahan, is that he's under the radar, I guess, as well as underrated. He doesn't get the attention he deserves. And I wonder whether if he's given a longer run in the Villa team, he might not be underrated. He'd actually get noticed and appreciated for what he actually does, rather than getting a few minutes here and there as sub, as he does at the moment.
Why do you think Dean Smith isn't playing him as much, Gary?
I really don't know. If I knew that, then maybe I would be Aston Villa manager. Who knows? But I think partly it's because of the way that they're playing, the system they're playing. So they've got 3 spots in midfield. Grealish and McGinn have sewn up 2. They're the first choices. And then Drinkwater, being the big name, came in January on loan, and he's pretty much taken the 3rd. But what Dean Smith has done, he keeps bringing Horahan on for kind of 10 minutes here, 20 minutes there, and then saying, oh, he's really made a difference, he's played well, and then not giving him the chance in the first team afterwards. It makes no sense to me.
Okay, Carrie, that's another staunch defence. Let's move on to Marcus Foley and the case for Buendia. Now, he looks lovely in a YouTube highlights package, Foley. We know that a lot of attacking midfielders do. Why is he not the new Andros Townsend or Nathan Redmond? A lot of flashy ability, but less end products as he kind of grows on.
Well, I'd probably point you to the stats I reeled off at the start. Fourth best number of assists in the Premier League. In a team that have scored the least goals in the league, joint with Newcastle, they've scored 25 goals. He's assisted 7 times. He's produced the 4th most chances in the league. And he's doing that at a team who, yes, tried to play expansive football. But realistically, if you played with a higher calibre of player, that would be a lot easier. So my point is, he will get a move this summer, I'm pretty sure. He will be relatively cheap because he's flown under the radar. And then in retrospect, this season that is already unbelievably underrated will look even more so when he starts pulling out championship level stats at championship level challenging teams.
So you think if he goes to a team, say, challenging for the Champions League, that he'll slot in there and keep it going?
Yes, because one of the big risks when you sign a team from a team who are fighting relegation is typically they will play a brand of football that you won't have played for a team challenging for the top 4. So then the transition is a bit more difficult. So if you play in a team, say Crystal Palace, for Pete's example, who are fairly direct and they go long a lot of the time, and then you move from there, having played well, and play for, say, someone, I don't know, Manchester United or a Chelsea, for example, with a more expansive approach, then that's a difficult transition. But Buendia, he already plays in a team who try to play like that. So the transition should be a lot smoother than other players. And he's got the talent. Like he was at Real Madrid in the youth team. Then he went to Getafe. Now he's come to Norwich. I mean, he's talented. The transition will be easy. He's done it in the Premier League already. He was superb in the Champions.
Now, of course, we're not the only ones to have opinions on this. Loads of you have got in touch on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram with your most underrated players. Thanks for that. It would be great to get your guys' thoughts on some of the players here. Alex Burke's got in touch. He says Dwight McNeil of Burnley.
I love Dwight McNeil. I mean, given what we all thought about Sean Dyche and Burnley as a whole, the idea that it was like sign 28-year-olds plus, English traditionally, very, very Route 1 sort of football, no interest in developing young players whatsoever. The way, as a club, that they've redeveloped their entire academy, they picked up McNeil when he was 14 or 15, I can't remember, but they brought him through, they developed him, and now he's the standard bearer for the rest of this academy. When Burnley got promoted, they had the worst academy in the Premier League by a mile. They were level 3, which is like down with some of the clubs in League 1 and stuff like that. They've really invested in it, to them, to be fair. And I think it's paying off with McNeil, and I think he's going to be the first of many.
So Stephen Locking and Aaron Turkington have also got in touch. They're saying James Milner's Liverpool. Now, personally, I don't think he's underrated. I think you know what you're getting with him, 6, 7 out of 10 performances, and he can slot into a side in multiple positions. But Carrie, do you have any thoughts on Milner and whether he is underrated?
Yeah, I don't think Milner would have been out of place in our discussion that we had last week about who should be Player of the Year. I think his importance to the squad is absolutely crucial. As you say, his versatility is probably the main role that he plays there. I think he is underrated perhaps a little bit in that he's not necessarily flashy. He gets on with the job that he's given to do, and he just does it. He's not necessarily the most exciting player to watch or to listen to quite a lot of the time, but I do think that he is an absolutely fantastic player, and good shout for underrated.
And finally, Marcus, Emran Bentaleb says Fred of Manchester United. Now, he's, of course, coming for a lot of criticism. As not much this season, but previous seasons, particularly last season. And he's definitely come on. But would you say he's underrated?
It's a tough one. I mean, it's all about sort of expectations. He came in with huge expectations. He didn't get much game time. Those expectations fell dramatically to the point where I think he might have been booed and stuff. And then he's come back into the team and his level has stepped up. Is it £50 million worth level? Maybe not. So I think it's probably difficult to say he's underrated just by nature of the price tag, but he's certainly improved. If we're having a conversation about the most improved player in the league this year, he'd definitely be in there, but underrated I think is a bit of a push.
Okay, thanks everyone. We do have to reach a conclusion this week. Last week we managed to swerve this. So it's time to stick or twist. Are you going to stick with who you picked, or are you going to change to someone that one of us guys said or one of the fans mentioned? We'll start with Pete Sharland.
Goalkeepers union, I'm afraid. I'm sticking with Guaita. No one gives goalkeepers any sort of respect they deserve. He's the most underrated player in the Premier League, no doubt about it.
Carrie?
Sticking, obviously. Hashtag Team Horahan.
Marcus, I think I know which way this is going.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to stick. Obviously.
Brilliant. We're not coming to a massive conclusion. So it basically comes to me for the casting vote now. You're probably not expecting me to stick with Lucas Mora, and you'd be correct. I'm actually being swayed by Pete Sharland's argument for Guaita of Crystal Palace. There was a 1-minute monologue, and I can't say I listened to it all. But there was a point where
that's the beauty of
saw
monologues.
in his eyes this absolute passion, something that he genuinely believed and wasn't just reading off a sheet of A4. So I think Pete Sharland, by virtue of my casting vote, wins it 2 votes to 1 to 1.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that, Ben.